Alabama Moon, Chapter 48, page 279. When we got back to the lodge, the sun had just set. I told Mr. Wellington that I wanted to sleep outside that night, and he nodded that he understood. I took a yellow pad of paper and a pencil from inside the lodge and walked to the edge of the clearing. I scraped the leaves from the base of the juniper tree and sat against it and began building a small fire from its bark. Once I had a fire going, I took the pad and pencil and began writing to Kit. At first I told him how much I missed him and reminded him that we were best friends. Afterwards I began to tell him about when I was little. I started with the first memories of my mother, like a yellow finch, beside me in the bed at night. My first clear memory was of Pap carrying me at his shoulders up the trunk of a leaning gum tree. We sat at its branches and waited for the deer in the dawn hours of a cold winter day. He hugged me into the warmth of his lap, and I could see his breath clouding over my head and dissolving in front of us. The first time I killed a deer, I was 6. Pat cut open the doe's stomach and cupped his hands to bring out the warm and steaming blood. He brought it up to my face and smeared it so it streaked past my ears and into my hair that became sticky and matted. I was proud of this time, and I told Kit all about it. It seemed that I was always watching Pap's hands. They were careful, powerful hands, and they taught me what I knew of survival in the forest. I told Kit about these hands and then about what they had taught me. I described the process of building a snare, stick by stick. I described a deadfall for him, complete with pictures. I made a list of everything that went into skinning and curing hides. I listed vegetables that we grew, the best times of the year to plant them, and how deep to place their seeds in the soil. I knew that Kit would want to know all these things. Finally, I told Kit exactly what had happened to my Pap and what I felt when he died. I remembered the daylight creeping into the forest that cold morning. Pap was already stiff by the time I could see his face in the light. My hand had rested on his cheek and felt it grow cold. I remember how cloudy it was, and how much wind passed through the trees that day. I told Kit about struggling to get Pap into the wheelbarrow as the fog hung between the giant trunks of the loblolly pines, and squirrels fussed at the struggle from above. I wrote and burned my pages and memories well into the night. It was late when Mr. Wellington came to check on me. I just wanted to make sure you weren't planning on settling into your old ways again. I shook my head. Do you have enough paper to keep that fire going? It's not to keep the fire going. I can keep a fire going without paper. Of course, Mr. Wellington said, and held out a blanket. I'm going to leave this in case you need it. I shrugged. I've got just about everything worked out with your uncle. He'll be here the day after tomorrow. I nodded. I'll be in the house if you need me. I lay on my side in the leaves and watched the last of the smoke curl away over the juniper fire. I listened to the wind in the trees and the needling of the insects and the settling of the birds in the brush. I trained my ears to filter all of these for some sign that Kit had gotten my message. I searched the dark shapes and patterns of the forest, hoping that they would turn into Kit's ghost. I was so tired that my eyes stung, and the last thing I remember of the night was trying to keep them open. I saw Mr. Wellington leave in his truck the next morning. He returned in an hour, and he had Hal with him. The two of them walked over to me and stood looking down at my head. He's just been burning paper in this fire, Mr. Wellington said. He thinks he can talk to dead people that way, Hal said. Moon, we're getting worried about you. You got to get straight again. Nobody else liked him, I said. I liked him, Hal said. Sometimes I gave him a hard time, and I shouldn't have. I liked him, though. I don't think it works, Hal. What? This smoke stuff. I told you. I felt my throat swelling and tears sliding down my cheeks. He's by himself, Hal. Moon, he had the best time of his life in that forest with you. He knew he was sick. He wasn't alone because of you. I looked up at Hal. Did he tell you that? That morning I left y'all in the forest, I tried to get him to come with me. I told him you might be crazy. I said you might get us killed. You know what he told me? I shook my head and wiped my face. He said he'd never been happier in his life. He said he wanted to stay out there in the forest with you no matter what happened. He knew he was taking a big chance. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand again. But I miss him, Hal. I know you do. Nothing wrong with that. Around noon, Mr. Wellington took Hal home again. When he returned to the lodge, I got up and went back inside. He made a sandwich for me, and I forced it down. I still didn't feel like talking, and Mr. Wellington said he understood. I lay on the sofa and watched the television, and everything it showed me of a world I knew so little about. Gradually, I began to think of my new uncle. I began to picture him climbing and trimming I began to picture him climbing trees and trimming their branches. I thought of my new aunt and pictured her like Mrs. Crutcher, the teacher back at Pinson. I tried to imagine what my cousins would look like, but images of Kit kept appearing, and I had to draw up my knees and roll over and blank my thoughts.